You know, the kind of impact that Pat McAfee has been having with ESPN, that's the impact that Bryan Hayes is having on our show right now. And yes, Bryan would gladly pay Aaron Rodgers to be on OverDrive every week because he's a massive Packers fan. Great to see you, Bryan Hayes. But we're not talking Packers. We're talking Mark Shapiro. We just showed the clips from the press conference on Thursday. All questions answered, I guess, right? Everything's cleared up, right?
Oh, totally. Everyone's on the same page in Toronto, right? Everyone loves everyone now because Mark Shapiro stepped up and did, I think, exactly what most people expected he would, Jay. Like, he's been in this position for 30-plus years. And if you're going to be an executive at the top, you're basically a politician. And I will give Mark Shapiro credit because he runs a great press conference in terms of the broadcasting. Right? There's no awkward pauses. There's no hums. There's no haws. It's a lot of smiling. He's great at it. And I think he made the determination over the last 5 days since Ross Atkins had his press conference, which was the complete opposite, right? It was more like it was almost like a Tommy Boy impression of a politician when Ross Atkins stepped up 5 days ago, that Mark Shapiro realized, I'm bringing Atkins back. John Schneider's coming back, so I have to soften things. And I need to pump their tires, and I need to try to cool the jets on people jumping on his GM, jumping on his manager. And I don't think it's going to work in terms of Jays fans looking back on the season any differently than they already are, and certainly not any differently than they did in terms of that two-game series against the Twins. But Shapiro, he's good at what he does when he gets in front of a mic, and I thought we saw that today.
You're absolutely correct. Very charming man. And yet Ross Atkins made it known last week that he found out about the decision to remove Jose Berrios in Game 2 of that series against the Twins live as it happened, or at least that's what he told us. Shapiro on Thursday said he knew of the plan to use Yusei Kikuchi. He just wasn't sure when. The whole justification for the move seemed to be that there was a plan in place, and yet there's a bit of a mixed message coming out as to what the plan was and when it was going to be executed. Isn't that part of the problem here, Bryan?
Yeah, I think so. And I think, again, it gets back to what I said earlier, Jay, that Shapiro was hedging here effectively. He's trying to save Schneider by saying that, you know, he didn't know when the plan was coming, right? That's John's call. That's the manager, and also kind of trying to save Atkins in a way in terms of suggesting also didn't know when it was coming. So I think what Mark Shapiro has done here is probably allowed people to understand what really happens here. Is the front office puts forth a philosophy, they put forth a plan, but it's on John Schneider to basically fall on the sword if it goes awry. Right? Like, that's kind of what I took out of it, is that Shapiro and Atkins, they have a philosophy in terms of planning, in terms of the way they want to see that plan executed, and they want to see their team play. But that's it. They don't ever want to fully explain it. And they certainly don't want blood on their hands if it falls by the wayside. So really, I think it was hedging from Shapiro. Again, it gets back to what I think was his plan going into this press conference. Try to protect Atkins, try to protect Schneider, try to give a little bit more information. But in the end, it possibly confused people even more, which, again, I don't think helps in terms of the big picture and where fans are at today.
And you mentioned falling on the sword. It seems like nobody's actually falling on the sword because, as you pointed out, Shapiro protected his two guys in Atkins and Schneider. Is it surprising to you that nobody's going to take any sort of blame for what happened in the postseason against Minnesota?
No, I'm not really, because I think this is the way the system is set up now in pro sports, where, you know, there's a manager / coach, there's a GM, then there's a president, then there's the owner, right? On top of everything, no one ever talks about the owner, and the owner is the one that actually hires all of these people. So what you have is a ton of insulation from one level to the next. And it's like, if the manager wants to stick around, he's got to fall on the sword for the GM. If the GM wants to stick around, he's got to fall on the sword for the president. And it goes all the way up the chain. So as a result, you get all this different, level of insulation there where no one feels responsible. And then they end up using all these cliches where it's, it was a group decision. Well, then you don't have to pinpoint one person in particular. That's modern sports in a nutshell. I mean, that's the way it generally works now. The Jays are not alone in this. I guess to the credit of Shapiro, he did technically say, the buck stops at the top, effectively. I'm putting words in his mouth. But I think what has come out of today and what has come out of this season for me, Jay, is that when you have possible PR disasters on your hands, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Blue Jays here, this, I guess, is my advice for the Jays. Let Mark Shapiro speak. Shapiro should be out in front of way more than he generally is, right?
Yes.
The Alek Manoah story, that was a really strange, overarching story all season. Atkins kept talking about it, but didn't say anything. And when he did, there was no clarity. Mark Shapiro should be speaking on those topics. The Anthony Bass story, that should have been Shapiro. Clearly, Atkins is not comfortable in those roles. If you're talking X's and O's, lineups, player acquisitions, all that kind of stuff, send Atkins out. But when it becomes something that is bothering a fan base or becomes very polarizing, I would like to believe what the Jays have learned here, and they kept using the word communication. Shapiro used it countless times today. Atkins, to a certain extent, did when he stepped up. Communication means you have to be clear in that.
Yeah.
And I think Mark Shapiro is much better in that role. So I would suggest Shapiro steps up and speaks more because he is the man at the top. And if that happens, Jay, then that's where the focus should be.
Yep.
Right? Shapiro's been here for 9 years. Shapiro was here when Anthopoulos left.
Yep.
Let's not forget that. Shapiro came in, Anthopoulos left, then he brought in Atkins. They're going into season 9 of their tenure. If Shapiro's at the top, like he said today, I think moving forward, that's where the line of questioning should begin. What happens with this team? Go ask Mark Shapiro.
I like it. I think it's an excellent suggestion, and they're not even paying you to do those suggestions. Bryan, you're great. Great to chat with you, and we'll see how this Jays team tries to reload for the next season as they attempt to not let their fan base down for an unprecedented God knows how many times. Bryan Hayes, you're the best. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jay.